Welcome, low ego action heroes. This is Debbie Levitt from DeltaCX.com. We are a full service CX and UX consultancy. Won't you check us out with all of that spare time you have? And welcome to our Tuesday office hours Ask Me Anything, which I do every Tuesday at 6:30 p.m. Italy time, which it is now. But today it is Ask Us Anything. I don't know where my own screen is because we do have a special guest who will be joining us in a few moments. So get your questions ready. We got 4 questions ahead of time. If you would like to ask a question, you can ask it here in the LinkedIn chat or the YouTube chat, though I will say your name out loud. If you need it to be anonymous, go ahead and use deltacx.link/ask. That will come into my email, which I'm going to watch for and try to get this right each week and juggle all of these ways questions can come in. And of course, before we start and introduce our special guest, let me also thank all of the low ego action heroes who are financially donating to the channel through the YouTube membership program. You just hit that join button, and people are giving $3 to $10 a month, which of course I reinvest in the channel and in delicious chocolate chips. So thank you for everybody donating. Totally optional because I do have a day job, but always appreciated. So thank you to that. Had some chocolate chips today. Grateful to all of you. What else can I tell you? Hey, don't forget to subscribe here on YouTube. And I bet you know 3 friends who need some help with their UX careers. Please make sure you're telling people about the UX channel here on Delta CX, and YouTube support would like me to remind you that when you press subscribe, press the bell and then press all. Otherwise, you might not get notified that cool things are happening here. All right, so let's bring in our special guest and get to know her. It is her first time on the show. Welcome, please, Karen T. Lin. I will spell that for you in case you are not looking at the screen. It's Karen, letter T, last name Lin. And Karen, tell us all about you.
Thank you so much, Debbie. It's great to be here. I have been in the UX space for over 15 years now, on the end-to-end product development, end-to-end from beginning requirements gathering all the way through to doing functional specifications, all the IA stuff, and even writing QA, manual QA test scripts and having to do testing side by side with developers. Let's see what else. I actually got into the internet in the mid 90s, which some people find interesting. I didn't realize it was a unique perspective for some folks, because I was growing up as the internet was growing up. So I still remember the before internet days. And then kind of saw it, slowly evolve step by step. So I started out teaching myself HTML, like building little, web pages on Angelfire, GeoCities, Lycos. Um, and then later on got into digital photography and Photoshop. And so by the time I got to college, I started building websites for different student groups, and it was like their very first ever website, right? Or very first ever email listserv, or newsletter, that kind of thing. And I was very lucky that it was through doing this work that I found somebody at my school who turned me on to the fact that we had a human factors program. And the school, by the way, is the same. Debbie and I, we went to the same
We
school.
went to the same school, though
Fun
some years apart. Some years apart.
Sure. Um, yeah, that was actually how I got into human factors, was because this classmate, upperclassman of mine, said, "Hey, if you love making websites, I'm actually taking a class for my major that is in user interface design." And I was just so surprised at that time. I was like, what? Like, you can major in this thing that I was already doing for fun? So that's how I got into the field. And ever since I graduated, I went straight into internet consulting, as a UX generalist. And have worked for all sorts of companies, in-house, external. I've been a head of product and UX for a SaaS startup, and my focus now is more on UX strategy for product market fit and startups specifically.
Very cool. Well, everybody get your questions ready for Karen, especially those product market fit and startup questions. I'm going to put the first question up on the screen and read it out loud because we got some long questions today. Some storytellers are amongst us. This one says, I've been watching some of your videos with Michele Ronsen, and I had a specific question regarding what she said in episode 64 and her note-taking technique utilizing templates to gather information during interviews. I recall you mentioning you generally don't use templates, like for creating personas, as you treat each project as a new project. Hello, Melanie. Hi, everyone. Hard to find the channel on the desktop. Yeah, I'm having some problems with YouTube hiding my channel, so please bookmark us and make sure the bell says all. What are your thoughts on Michele's technique here? Do you have any other note-taking strategies for analyzing user interviews that consist of open-ended questions? How do you mitigate feeling overwhelmed with varied responses? Okay, so Karen, I'm not too sure about your... Oh, hello, Manho. I'm not too sure about your research background, but do you want to take a shot at some note-taking suggestions?
Well, I'm sorry I'm not Michelle.
No,
So
we
I
know
can't,
that. Stop
I
that.
can't, yeah, I can't answer. I actually have no clue what her note taking technique is, and in terms of using templates. But it sounds like the question is for like you're kind of evaluating someone's feedback qualitatively. Um, so during these interviews, what I like to do, I mean, I feel like everyone's way of processing information is a little bit different, but what works for me is I'm listening for um, specific themes because I want to understand what is this person's point of reference in this for this particular topic. Where are they coming from? What are their mindsets and their attitudes, and what past behaviors have informed that? So I'm looking for basically what is the story or what is their journey of understanding this particular product or industry or whatever the scope is of your research, to get that context so that you can make sure that whatever it is, whatever feedback it is that they give you after, as you're going, through and asking specific questions, that you have that context of why they might be or how they might be answering them. And kind of, are they answering it because they have a very narrow um, perception of what their problem is, or have they tried different things? Are they willing to be open-minded? That, I mean, that's my take in a nutshell.
Yeah, yeah. This is, hey, welcome to the show. We get random questions and we have to come up with some answers. Hi, Craig. Craig, don't forget to reschedule our appointment. So to respond to this, I don't remember episode 64 offhand, since we're up to like episode 150. But I do know what you're referring to when I said I don't like to use templates. Now, what I meant was I don't like to do UX by template. So, for example, I'm not doing UX by sticky note templates and canvases and pre-made personas where you already have the picture and you're just dropping in some irrelevant facts. So it's not like if someone has a note-taking template or something like that, it's really bad and I'm against it. So if Michele has a helpful template, you should use it. I'm typically against what I call UX by template, which is like people who don't really have good UX skill yet. They just kind of dump things into a template and then they think they've done UX. So that part of, Dipta says, I just Googled what product market fit is and I found a diagram where UX was in the solution space and product market fit was in the product space. Doesn't UX cover both problem and solution space? I thought so. Craig can probably answer that one, and Karen. Oh my God. All right, hold on. That's a whole other question. Let's
Yeah,
finish
that's
this question and
opening up
then
a
let's,
can of worms.
yeah, let's finish this question and then let's jump in and take Udipta's question next, even though he technically isn't next. We'll get to the next questions next. But the other thing, so let's see, what else does this say? What are my thoughts on Michele's technique? I don't remember it because that show is probably a year and a half old, so I apologize, but I usually tend to agree with the things Michele teaches. Do I have other note taking strategies? So, Michele did a second show with us on note taking strategies. So, please go to the micro lessons playlist and take a look for note taking strategies in the micro lessons playlist. And Michele said a bunch of fresher things there. And that was just 2 months ago. So, that could be a good show for you to watch. And Victor, we will answer your question later. You're just popping up here. Let's see. And then what else did you ask? How do you mitigate feeling overwhelmed with varied responses? So, what I think you mean here is you're trying to run the interviews and you're trying to take notes at the same time. That's usually not recommended for newbies because there's just too much to try to do as an interviewer. So I would say if you are new to UX, maybe don't be your own note taker. I think it takes a lot of years of interviewing to get good at juggling, doing the interviews, thinking of good follow-up questions, right? Craig and I were talking about this a couple of weeks ago, and trying to take some of your own notes. Hi, Tara. Hi, Charlene. So I would say the best way to feel not overwhelmed is take that off your plate. See if you can find a buddy to be your note taker. Craig says, I have 2 articles to share. One that shows the missing U in UX. So everyone's going to have to Google for this. 3 ways that UX designers can gain insight from the marketing team. Because that's too long a URL. I can't put that back. Oh yeah, Sasha also says, why not record the interview and go back later and take notes? Another good idea. All right, so we're going to run with that as the
Okay.
answer to that. Yes, Karen.
Oh, sorry. I just wanted to jump in because I just noticed the question said, do you have other note-taking strategies for analyzing user interviews?
Hmm.
Um, I don't think note-taking and analyzing, they're not the same step. During the interview, you're just trying to capture as much as possible by making sure you're asking questions that allow you to get inside that user's head as much as possible. So you shouldn't really be analyzing beyond, okay, somebody said this, somebody said they always like to, use the red pen instead of the blue pen, right? The only analyzing that should be going on in that point is you thinking, oh, maybe there's something there. Tell me a
Right.
little bit more about why that is, right? Or in what situations or how frequent, this issue comes up, or not frequent,
Right.
things
Just
like
thinking
that.
about your follow-up questions.
Right. So if
Oh,
you find yourself analyzing as the interview is going on, you'll have to, remind yourself to put a pin in that part, because you'll do that later after the interview is over.
good point. Okay, let's jump on Udipta's question, even though it's a little bit out of order. It's definitely right in Karen's wheelhouse, I think. Googled that UX is the solution space, but product market fit is the problem space. Doesn't UX cover the problem and the solution space? Karen!
So this this is the problem space of UX that is at the root of this question or this diagram, which is that in my experience or my point of view is that the original ethos of UX is user-centered design. Um, Nowadays, a lot of people think of UX as equivalent to the design deliverable. Like here are the screens or the wireframes that come before the screens. So the use of the word UX in this diagram probably is effectively synonymous with this is the product, right? This is the app. This is the thing that is being delivered. For me, UX is looking at the entire experience of that particular user or target audience, agnostic of the technology, of the product, of the features. Of course, at the end of the day, something needs to get built and shipped in order for there to be something for people to consume and to use. Um, but what I mean by UX and product market fit is taking a user centered design approach to figuring out, okay, what should and needs to be built and what
Yeah.
shouldn't.
Yeah, thanks for
Sorry.
that. I think whatever that diagram was, I guess we're lucky that we were put in the solution space because it could have just said UX makes it pretty. But it sounds like that's somebody who doesn't, as Karen pointed out, totally get. Tara says nods excitedly in agreement. So there you go. We have someone agreeing. Now, thank you for
Yeah, I
that.
think
Go ahead.
another way to put it is I think the person's use of UX in this context is a low maturity way of using the term UX, whereas a high maturity use of UX would be thinking about UX from a more strategic level.
Oh, excuse me. I'm not yawning at you. Everyone knows I fall apart at 3 p.m. and it's nighttime here. So our next question is incredibly long, but Craig is commenting. Craig says a very good example of this is the rental market. I did a contextual diary study with people renting apartments, studied them for 4 to 6 weeks, and helped come up with a new idea. Craig is the king of experimentation. Okay, so I'm going to paste the next question, but it's a little bit on the long side. It looks like
Hmm.
this. I'm going to have to read this because there's a lot here. So give me a moment, everybody. This says, during my boot camp, I really focused on research and asked open ended questions to users during one on one interviews. It was really interesting to observe how people tend to describe their experiences in summary form. I think I did a decent job extracting stories by probing deeper. Despite being able to collect rich stories from multiple users, the insights my team and I took away felt rather obvious. In short, the insights sounded a lot like the summaries we heard from our users. I suppose the research validates the summaries and generalizations some of the users had, but after stepping away from the project, I wonder if the insights we highlighted were actually not very insightful. Is this an example of bad research? To give context, we interviewed homeowners about their experience working with contractors that did big or small repair jobs on their property. From our research, we gathered that communication is a huge pain point. All our users tried to summarize, and for anyone who's had to coordinate repairs for anything, it seems like an obvious conclusion. I guess my main question is, when should a researcher stop to assess whether or not they're doing the right things that result in meaningful and good research? Okay, so there's a couple of questions packed into this one, Karen. Sorry about that. That's why I recommend people take some notes. Karen, what do you want to respond to here?
Yes, I feel like there's multiple layers of questions here.
Welcome to the
One,
show.
the first thing that jumped out at me was saying that how your users tend to summarize. I think they mean summarize their answers to questions, maybe. And I say that because I have been in situations where during user interviews, I'm asking a question and I notice that the responses that I'm receiving are kind of very general responses. Like, I'll ask somebody like, oh, how often, do you order takeout? And the answer might be like, sometimes, or, or oh, every once in a while, or even like, oh, not too often. Um, So these are very generic responses. and with some people, you do have to probe a little bit deeper and try to get them to say in a little bit more detail, well, okay, so by sometimes, do you mean once a week, once a day, once a year, right? So it is helpful to dig a little bit deeper. But generally speaking, if you find that the insights you're uncovering start to sound a little bit repetitive or a little bit obvious, um, I would say it's potentially the questions you're asking um, aren't uncovering enough of the details around, who, what, when, where, why, and how, right? In order to get a little bit more color to, yeah, we know communication is a problem, right? But how, when, where, is it always a problem? Is it only sometimes a problem when in particular situations or circumstances, right? There's certain triggers. What are those triggers? So that for me, that's the intent behind doing this type of research, is to get at those details, and uncover and understand what are the different conditions, what are the barriers, what are the facilitators, what are the motivators, things like that. So
Totally
that
agree. And
that's the shit that be obvious, right? This is the stuff that isn't obvious, right? Or immediately obvious until you do dig deeper.
yeah, super agree. And I also like Manho's comment on the screen, like maybe the users weren't diverse enough, but my reaction would be, how did you recruit them? Because sometimes at boot camps, it's like, go find 5 friends. And they might not have been the right people to participate. Janice says, thanks for the specific tips, Karen. So I wrote down 2 notes while Karen was talking, and one of them says survey style, because I find very often at boot camps, the type of interviewing people are taught is to take questions you would ask in a survey and ask them these people when you see them, or when you're zooming with them, or whatever it might be. And so you tend to get a lot, I know, but I see boot camps teaching this sometimes. And so it's like, oh, when you get your people on the interview, ask them how old they are and what job they do, and if they sometimes hire contractors, and have they ever had a problem communicating with contractors, and scene. I need my prop for that, like, okay, and now we know it. And so one is, I think sometimes boot camps accidentally teach in interviewing style that really sounds like these questions should be survey questions, or they're not even good survey questions. And then the other thing I wrote down was, I find very often with boot camps, so Craig says, break down the comms, classify them, understand them, keep scratching. Craig is that wild dog at the door. The other thing I wrote down is goals. I find that a lot of boot camps skip over research planning, and a lot of the students don't really get into their research goals. They know they want to talk to people about problems with contractors, but they didn't stop and say, what are we looking to learn here? How do we know we've asked the right questions? You have to go back to your goals and see, what am I asking and why? And then how would this ultimately affect, in a real life scenario, prioritization, decisions, strategies, design. So you want to make sure that your goals are going to be asking questions that will set these things up for success later. So I find that a lot of boot campers and self-study people ask questions that they're curious about, and they lose sight of the goals. Why am I doing this research? What do I need to know? What do I need to learn about communication with contractors that would set the rest of this project up for success? And instead they accidentally fall into, I'm going to ask curious questions. Laura says, this is definitely what my boot camp taught. The bad interviewing techniques, it bothered me a lot as a student. Good to see you, Laura. Yeah, unfortunately, this is quite common. I see this on a lot of portfolios that boot campers send me, and it's a little heartbreaking. A little heartbreaking. So I would say I agree with Karen, to the original person who asked the question. I would totally agree that it sounds like some of your research planning might not have been as good as it could be, and you might not have asked some of the right questions. And of course, going along with that, the boot camps very rarely check your work along the way. And so you probably didn't know you asked some not great questions until the whole thing was over.
Yeah, I'd say for surveys, there's only two real reasons to use surveys. One is to screen participants, for who you want, to actually interview and, prioritize like speaking with. And second is it's for quantitative analysis, right? But you would need a sample size of at least,
Hundreds,
I don't know,
possibly.
10,000
It feels like
people.
that.
So when I hear or see people asking survey type questions in one-on-one interviews, I always just say, stop. What are you doing? You're just conducting the world's slowest survey ever by deploying like to one person at a time. Like, why do you want to waste your time and that other person's time? Like, just don't do that. And in response to what Debbie you just said about goals, my motto and mantra for acquiring any information, right? This is what I do to try to actively prevent myself from becoming an information addict, right? Is I always ask myself, what how would the answer to this question of like who wore what to where, right? What celebrity did what when? I'm like, I always have to stop myself and be like, okay, how will the answer to that question significantly impact my life? And if the answer is it won't or very little, then I stop myself. I'm like, okay, I'm not even going to go there, right? And I think it's the same. There is a tendency when we're doing any type of research project, right? Everyone thinks they want to know everything, but you have to still be like, but why? Like, what would the effort of going through and collecting all of this information do if we don't know what we're going to do with the information anyway? You may as well not collect it.
Good point. Yeah, thank you for that. And hello, Ugochukwu Paul. I hope I pronounced your name okay. I'm bad with names from everywhere. Someone from LinkedIn. All right, our next question looks like this. How do you handle, or what are some techniques you use when your design teammates go off track into the weeds?
My first thought with this question, without any further context of what going into the weeds.
I know, where's the long story here?
But I suspect the issue here is designers are designing in a vacuum. And what I mean is, in absence of insights, strategy, what are the goals that users have and what are they trying to get out of it? It's very easy as you're designing or coming up with any solution to just come up with whatever you want because you have no, you know what I mean? Like there are no constraints. There's nothing directing you to help you converge on a particular solution. So yeah, so everybody can go off in like all sorts of directions. And to me, that's the absence of not having enough insights or information to be strategic about what it is you're choosing to do.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I can certainly agree. And again, we don't know the story here of how they're going off track or into the weeds, but my guess would be that perhaps they don't have that clear plan. Perhaps they haven't prioritized the pain point or the user need or the thing that they're working on, and so people are just in kind of an endless brainstorming mode. Like, and what if it did this? And what if it did this? And how about it could do? Oh, it could do this. Oh, and what about the competitor? They're doing this. And so I think that when there's somebody setting off the Deb emoji. So so yeah, I think that is probably what's happening. And I think if designers are really going off the track, I guess the question is, how do you know the track and they don't? So it sounds like whatever is the track probably has to be documented or expressed clearly so that they understand, okay, for this piece of work, this is the goal, or this is the success criteria, or this is the outcome we're looking for. Stay focused on the solutions and ideas that accomplish that. Tara says, I put together strategy snapshots that design utilizes to keep the North Star in mind. Interesting. That is a neat idea. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, the next question
I
is
would
a
also
oh,
add. Oh,
yep.
sorry. I was going to add to
Sorry, we
that.
always
Don't
get
mean
so
to
many
keep.
questions, so I try to blow through them as fast as we can. So
Okay.
sorry.
Yeah, I
Uh,
know. I would add to that to help with prioritization too. See if you can give designers a time box, right? Say something like, okay, I want you to look at this, come up with a solution, but don't spend more than 2 days on it, right? Before checking back in and seeing, okay, are we still on target? Because the other thing to consider is that not every feature or product is equally valuable from a business perspective. So before you blow through too much time and resources figuring out should this button be red or blue or green or purple, make sure you're spending the appropriate amount of time for the value, the business value, or the end user value that's expected to be derived out of that effort.
Okay, thanks. We've got a bunch of questions and the show is half
Okay.
over. So I'm gonna push us through to the end because neither of us can stay late today. We will be staying a little bit late next week, but we cannot today. Um, I'm seeing Meta using product thinking in their UX job posting. Pass. All right. So the next question is a very short one because the person who sent it probably should have just Googled this. The person said, "What does flesh out design ops documentation and material mean? I saw it on a job posting for UX internship, but I cannot understand what they mean." Flesh out is something you can Google. Design ops documentation is probably something you can Google. We push critical thinking here on the channel and we push curiosity. And I would say, probably before you ask me a question, see if you can find that on the Google. Sorry. Sorry for the tough love on that one. But, Karen, anything you want to add here?
Um, it's probably for an internship, it's probably they need help just with their documentation, the functional documentation. So the solution has been more or less designed already. They need somebody to literally like go through, do the annotations, do the detailed way of
Super grunt work,
documenting
almost
whatever it is.
production work.
Yeah.
Yikes, Orama. Okay, so moving on, lightning round. Next question looks like this. I just got a design job offer from an established company, but I'm also involved with another startup in a volunteer capacity that's in the same industry. Do you have any advice for navigating this situation, which is a potential conflict of interest?
It is a conflict of interest. Um, the established company likely has policies around you have to report all conflicts of interest, um, and then they will decide whether or not to do anything about it, right? They will decide whether it's enough a big enough of a conflict of interest to ask you to stop or whatever it is.
Yeah, and I would add to that, who knows about who? Because if you were already volunteering at the startup and then you got a job offer from the other company, did they know you were working at the startup? Do they think they're going to get information from out of you from the startup? Chances are the startup considers whatever they're doing to be confidential. So just make sure that the established company doesn't expect that you're going to come in and spill the beans about the startup. You absolutely have to treat everything that happened at the startup and everything you know about the startup as confidential. You cannot show up to the other job and go, "Well, over at the startup, we're doing it like this." You can't do that. You run risks from you never get a job in this town again to you are being sued. So I would say please be careful of what the established company is hoping to learn from you. And I would say you're probably going to have to pick one and leave the other. Craig says they both need to be aware. They will decide if this is a clash or infringes on potential competitive issues that you may not know about. Yeah, there might be something in the contract that says you can't work for another company in our industry for X amount of time, which I think isn't enforceable in California, but sometimes shows up in contracts. So, person who asked this, please be careful. This could get you into some legal ugliness. Okay, I will put up the next question. Thank you, Karen. That was a super answer. This question says, I'm new in UX. Sasha says, don't forget the NDAs. Yeah. I'm new in UX and I'm working on a project, but I'm having a challenge with creating a user persona. How will I combine survey and interview to create a persona? Ooh, everybody knows I'm going to burn this one down. Karen, what's your answer for this one?
I actually wrote an article about this, so my answer is go read my article.
How do we Google for it? What's it called?
What is I can't remember what it's called. Something
Oh,
like three oh my gosh.
oops.
Three mistake I don't know, it was like three mistakes you're making with your personas or something like that. I gotta look for it. But
All right, Google for that with
I'll share it
Karen's
with you,
name.
Abby, and you can share it out.
Oh, okay. So is that the
That's
answer?
me.
Okay, very good. The answer is go find her article. Okay.
They go
Um,
into detail, so yes, you
And
can.
my
There's
answer
no
would
time.
be here on the YouTube channel, please go into the micro lessons playlist where we have a couple of videos on personas and when you need a persona and when you don't, and how to make a persona. Number one, I would not be making personas from surveys. I recommend against that. I believe that personas need to be made from a more qualitative research like observational research and interviews. So be careful of making personas from surveys. You might end up with marketing personas that say, well, they like Starbucks and they're 27 years old. Well, great. I can't prioritize for that. I can't design for that. These to me might work for sales and marketing, but they don't work for me. Oh, hey, Naz, good to see you. Janice says, I found the article. It's called Three Common Mistakes in Creating Business
Oh,
Personas. So thank you. We've got a super audience. So
thank you.
everybody Google for that. Google for that. Yeah, Craig says, look out. Personas could be cardboard cutouts. So yeah, thing one, don't make them from surveys. Thing two, we recommend making them from observational research and task analysis. And we have a video on that in the micro lessons playlist called Task Analysis Personas. So putting the question back up just to make sure I didn't miss something. Yeah, how will you combine a survey and an interview to create a persona? Leave out the survey and make sure the interview does task observation so that you're making personas based on the behaviors of people and the tasks they're trying to accomplish, and not just they're 27 and they like Starbucks and they're 70% friendly. I can't design for 70%. I can't design for that. What if they're 75% friendly? Same thing. So, hate that stuff. All right. We got another question. Let's put it up on the screen. Sorry, I have so much copying and pasting. Nobody knows. All right. Looks like this. User-centered design means different things to different practitioners. Can UCD be wrong if focusing on a narrow or product preference at the start?
What is a product preference? I'm trying to think of an example.
I'm assuming it
Um,
means maybe you already kind of have the idea of what you want to build, like a feature driven or feature factory kind of thing. Like that kind of preference. That's my guess.
um, well, okay, I guess I'll answer it kind of like if you already have a product, I guess, versus like starting from scratch. If you already have a product, there's still always, I mean, regardless of whether or not you already have a product, there is always ways to do the user-centered design work, right? So you have a product, it's already in use. There actually are some advantages to that, right? Because then you hopefully already have a user base that you can, tap into, get their feedback of what they like or don't like, or what works or doesn't work about the current product or solution. But it's always important to find ways to work backwards in a sense to get that broader and broader context. And what I do see a lot of companies do, especially very big established companies, because they're so big and there's so many people involved and so many products, solutions, and features, they tend to get into their silos of what it is that they're working on. And part of it is just because, the company is just so big. You have to have so many people to help manage everything that's going on. But the risk there is that over time you can start to lose sight of the fact that a user is a single person, right? They're not thinking about your business, in terms of, oh, I only just need this one product or one feature today. They're thinking of okay, this is my goal, and you tell me what products or features I need to use, or it needs to be intuitive, for that user to figure out, okay, well, what do I need to use in order to get to my goal? So from a user-centered design perspective, understanding that goal is always the goal, I guess, and can and should in some ways be as agnostic of the product, the feature, the tech, as possible. If you want to, be as holistic and innovative as possible.
Yeah, thanks for that. The what I would throw in here is user-centered design. It's sometimes defined differently by different people, but ultimately it's a process where you need to be strategic and you'll need to pick and choose what you're going to do based on what's going on and the outcomes you're trying to create, and sometimes that time and budget, which unfortunately can cut things short. So it's not to me that user-centered design necessarily is different definitions. It's more that the process can be fluid and adjusted based on what's the right thing to do for the project and the outcomes that you're looking to create. So it's not that I think UCD is wrong. To me, UCD is always the number one choice, no better choice, but you might have to say, for this project, we do need this or we don't need this. Or, hey, for research, we're going to do this, but we're not going to do this. And we need this many rounds of design and this many rounds of testing. You just have to be strategic and adjust it to what's going on. So if you have a narrow product focus or a narrow area you're looking to work on, you just have to adjust the tasks and phases of user-centered design for what you're doing. That's what I would say. Anything you want to
Can
add?
can you put the diagram back up, because I wanted to point something out.
Yeah, I need to
Um,
fix it.
oh no, I mean, no, nothing. That's not actually not to
Okay.
nitpick at it. I just wanted to point out to the audience that every single step you see here, um, does not does not have to be user centered, right? Like there is an opportunity. Actually, chances are, wherever you're working, this is the design process, but it's not user centered at every single step of the way. There
Which
is a
one
way to
wouldn't be?
do. Right, exactly. No, they should all be user
Yes, right.
centered.
Okay, I thought you were
Yeah,
saying they shouldn't all be
yeah, no, no,
user-centered, and I'm
no.
like, which ones shouldn't be?
No, they should. They all should be user centered. What I'm saying that is the reality is that in most places they're not, or
Ah,
maybe only
right.
some certain steps are, right? So there's always an opportunity to become more and more centering of users and their experiences in every single step, because at every single step there are decisions that have to be made along the way that will impact the user experience, the outcome, not the product. UX, the outcome, not UX, the product. That's what I'm saying.
Thank you. All right. We've got about 15 minutes left. We've got one question, so we probably have time for another one or two if people want to throw them at us. And of course, as always, won't you please subscribe to the channel? And if you enjoy the show, please find 3 friends who you think would love a show like this, maybe have some questions of their own to ask. Let them know about the show and please tell them subscribe and ring that bell. Okay, so the last question we have for now, maybe another one will pop up, says, recently, I was suffering through a whiteboard interview in which the lead UX researcher of a big company was surprised when I asked how you are using the recruiting of users, and he explained to me the criteria, the screening questions, the eliminating questions, how they include diversity, which tools they use, if they hire third-party companies to reach users. The lead researcher just told me she uses Twitter and Facebook for that. Obviously, I was rejected for that job. I think certain researchers don't understand how important it is to select the correct users. Karen.
Um, this is an observation and not a question. It's a valid observation. I don't know what else to say. It's true. um, uh, this is just true. I don't the unfortunate truth. Um, and part of the reason why I think Debbie is doing what she's doing. Debbie's a big part of also why I'm doing trying to do more to help educate and spread awareness. um, and I mean, I guess what I'll say to that is not every business or industry needs good UX, right? Like that's the truth. If a lot of businesses can get by with um, what I call building big and failing big, or burning and churning their way through users and employees to get to some kind of ounce of success. Um, and that we all of these companies will say they do UX, but whether or not UX actually matters to the core business is a whole different story. So I that's my answer in terms of explaining for why these things happen. And it's just that it hasn't been made core or essential to that business. They're able to succeed riding on other forms of power, privilege that they have to stay in business.
Yeah. Oh, here they go. Ray just joined and said instant truth bombs. And Manho says, why does it seem offensive to ask these questions in the interview? Yeah, it's amazing how sometimes when you show people you're actually thoughtful and intelligent, they go, oh, holy crap, don't hire them. So, you missed an opportunity you probably didn't want. So I think that you did the right thing. I think you can certainly ask these questions, and it reveals a lot about the workplace. We
Company,
had
yeah.
episode 129, which I recommend very highly. If you don't know how to navigate our YouTube channel, just go to YouTube and type in Delta CX 129. Episode 129 will pop up. And that was when Julia DeBari talked about some good questions we can ask during interviews to see what kind of environment we're coming into. And certainly, how do you do research? And in this case, how do you find the users you want to do the research with? Can be a pretty good question that tells you a little bit about what to expect from this environment. So yes, that was more of a story and comment than a question, but it was a good one. We just got in another surprise question. So this question says, what are some key transferable skills that junior UX professionals could actively seek to gain from job experiences?
Transferable to what is my question?
Yeah, I was
To this
wondering
question.
transferable from what to
Um,
what? Transferable from a non UX job to a junior UX job? Transferable from what to what?
I mean, I guess if you're looking for what are skill sets that just make you a better professional in general, not specific to UX work. Um, I love what Darren Hood says about EQ. You know, the importance of EQ. Really, anywhere you go. I think he also sets a really great example of what it means to be a great teacher. And being able to explain and to teach, help people understand new concepts, build new skills. So once you learn how to do that for yourself, helping other people through that process is a wonderful skill. I think that sets people up for success no matter what they do, and in life. If you decide to have kids one day, that is super helpful, I can say, speaking from experience. uh, yeah, I mean, teamwork, yeah, communication skills. I think what's critical for UX and will become more and more critical for future jobs. I'm talking about jobs that we don't even have titles for now, right? Like, because in the next 20, 50 years, the landscape will be so different. Is the ability to gather and take divergent views and to be able to synthesize and converge, and distill insights that are then actionable. So I often hear people say like, oh, I'm just getting into UX, but I was in a totally other, different field. And I always say like, hey, that's great. That's okay. Not only is that okay, that is great. That is wonderful that you are not coming into UX from the tech industry, right? Because, um, because doing really good UX work really is about your ability to understand other people's experiences, not just the experience of those who are in the industry. So the more you have personal experiences to bring to the table that are different, and represent, other people's experiences in other industries, other, jobs, those are all like, huge assets to bring to your work.
Yeah, I think ultimately anything that helps you, some of that emotional intelligence stuff, anything that helps you accept feedback and be able to change what you're doing. Because sometimes people can hear feedback, but then still do it their own way. Am I right, person who's here live in the audience and has spoken to me about this? So I think that that is something that is worth working on improving, because it's something that's really important in UX. Being able to hear that your design isn't that strong, or ooh, you didn't really apply the right principles here, and then and having your response to that be great, teach me more, rather than what, how dare you, this is pretty good. So I would take a look at some of that. Let's see. Somebody named Facts is here and says, I've heard so much about the importance of storytelling with data. Oh, okay. So this is a question. We've got a question before this one. No, that was it. Oh, hold on. Let's see. Do I have a new question? Yes. What are some UX interview red flags you've come across? And then we'll take a look at facts questions and Ugo Chuku Paul's question, and then we're out of here. Interview red flags. Karen, do you do a lot of interviewing?
I'm assuming this is job interview
That's what
red
I'm
flags.
thinking too. Like people
Um,
we've interviewed where we were like, oh, holy cats.
yeah. Um, I think it really depends on the business. Some things to look out for, but I would say maybe not red flags, more yellow flags. Like maybe you should look into it a little bit more as opposed to being like, okay, an immediate deal breaker. Um, if find out like how big is the UX team, how long they've been around. I mean, these are just questions that I like to ask. What was the impetus for suddenly, this company deciding, oh, we need a UX team? Who used to do that work, like that diagram that Debbie showed, that I said isn't necessarily user centered. Somebody was doing this work all along, right? Whether it was the developers themselves or the product managers or the founders if it's a startup, and find out, well, what makes them feel like it's critical to have a team dedicated to doing that, in a user centered way. And if they don't know the answers, I would say that's a yellow flag. So I just always try to ask, well, who is somebody I could talk to who would have that answer? And then you can kind of, assess and evaluate from there. I can't think of any red flags. I don't know, Debbie, how about you?
Well, yeah, I would say that episode 129 are some great questions you can ask during an interview to look for company red flags. Episode 128, right before that, was how to give more concise and compelling interview answers. And it's a little bit of self-assessment red flag. So you can try to see where you could do a better job interviewing. As an interviewer, I would say some of the key things that set off red flags for me would be someone who either can't describe their own process or or doesn't really have a process. Like when I say, well, how did you approach that? And they're just like, my favorite story of all time is the guy who's like, yeah, I'm a unicorn. I do UX design and visual design and coding. And I said, okay, what's your process? And he goes, oh, first I open Adobe Illustrator. And I was like, no, like what's your UX process? And he goes, yeah, I use Illustrator, because this was many years ago. And I was like, oh, that's not a process. So I would say that's a red flag. Or people who just don't have direct answers for questions. I did an interview last year with someone, and I said, again, I said, tell me about your research process. And he was like, research, it's so important. Research, you've got to have empathy for people. Research, like, and I never found out what his process was. So, so be careful. So whenever I hear like a lot of buzzwords like, oh, first I have empathy, I'm going to stop you and I'm going to ask you how you have empathy. And what did you have before you had the empathy? What were you doing? How did the empathy start and when did it end? I've decided that if people start saying these weird things, I'm going to ask them questions about it. And you might not have a good answer. I'm going to stop you and say, tell me where your empathy started and ended. These are some things that are red flags for me. I know we have 2 questions in 3 minutes, so we're going to have to do the lightning round version of these 2 so that we're not running late. Let me get the first one. Well, the second one's easy because it was someone asking if I have certain videos on the channel. I've heard so much about the importance of storytelling with data. Are there ways or practices we can undertake to hone this, or would you say it's more of an innate art?
I would say that it's important. Like, why is storytelling so important? It's about impact, having impact, right? So, data is just a bunch of numbers. It's hard for people to, make sense of, well, what do I do with this information? So in terms of practicing it, actually, something that I did this past year was I started to take improv classes.
Ooh.
And I personally find it really fun and funny to do it. But I also realized it was helping me build my confidence for just kind of being able to tell stories and, speak off the cuff. So in a sense, it is an art or a craft that takes practice. So that's one of the things I really recommend now if you want to get better at communicating, but also figure out, what to do with the data. How do you make sense of the data and present it in a way that people are like, oh, I get it, right? This is what I need to go do now.
Yeah, making it actionable. And I would add to that, first, make sure you have a sense of what information your teammates were looking for and what actions they have to take from that data or information, whether it's a research report or something else. And that way you can make sure you're delivering this in a form that is likely to make sense to them. And I also recommend read your audience. If people seem distracted, they're not listening, then you might have written a part of the report that isn't exciting. Get to the next slide, move along. You don't want to lose the audience. Neither do I. Okay, last question, which was, hi, Debbie. Is there an episode on the YouTube where you give whole details of what's needed for a good research phase during UX design process? Yes and no. In our micro lessons playlist, we have a how to plan observational research micro lesson. I think there's a little bit in there that will kind of help you see what needs to go into the research, because it's going to be the planning, the recruiting, the screener survey, the questions you ask, and some of that other stuff. So that might help. You might also want to watch a little bit of task analysis and optimized task flow from the same micro lessons playlists. And since we talk about the importance of thorough observational research and being able to understand people's tasks, but I'm not sure. Oh, bye, Craig. See you later. But I'm not sure if we have a show that is just, hello, here's what you need for wholesome research. But you can always go to YouTube and type Delta CX Research. You'll get every video we've ever done that's got the word research in the title. And so you could then just look through those and see if anything seems to tickle you. I know we've done about 8 to 10 episodes with Michele Ronsen on research. Some of those might appeal to you. So we are late and out of time. So Karen, let everybody know how they can find you, follow you, hire you, whatever it is you do.
Best way to connect with me is LinkedIn. So just linkedin.com/in/Karen Lynn.
Excellent. Everyone find Karen on LinkedIn. Tell her you saw her on the show. Again, everybody, remember to please subscribe and tell friends about the channel. I am battling the YouTube algorithm and I need your help. And with that, I'm going to say goodbye to everybody. And let's see, I have to check if we have a show tomorrow. Do we have a show tomorrow? Someone help me. No, because I have my full day workshop tomorrow. But I will see everybody at Thursday's Slack networking and Friday's critical thinking stream. Thanks again to Karen for joining in. Super fun, great answers. Everybody be well. See you soon. Bye. Customer centricity as business intelligence. Visit deltacx.com to learn why we are